ladies and gentlemen, Allan Zavod.
You want to fool around?
Mm-hmm.
You look good.
Thanks.
You know, it's been a nice age. I've missed you. You old ball and chain.
Hi, welcome to Wrokdown. I'm Wendy Stapleton. My special guest this evening was a child prodigy in Australia before being discovered by Duke Ellington in 1969. Duke encouraged him to attend the Berklee College of Music in Boston, and after that he auditioned for the amazing Mr. Frank Zappa, who gave him the job on the spot as keyboard chair. Would you please welcome Dr. Allan Zavod?
Hi, Wendy.
How are you, darling?
Great.
Doctor of?
Doctor of music.
I was hoping that you'd say that.
Doctor of music. People said to me they didn't know music was sick. I don't know what to say, you know. It's very rare. I mean, Melbourne University have only given 4 Doctor of Musics in composition, earned Doctor of Musics in composition, in the entire history.
Well, congratulations, Allan.
Yes, thanks.
I would like to start at the beginning. You were born in Melbourne? Yes?
I was.
Can you tell us a little bit about your childhood? Because I know that your dad was an amazing, and still is, as you said, he's still an amazing violinist.
Wonderful musician's been a great encouragement to me in my musical upbringing. He created the environment. While my mother, Anne, was encouraging, took me to every music competition and pushed and did the mother, you know, the parent, that aspect of the parent thing. My father was there actually creating the music. And, you know, it takes you into...
So you virtually grew up playing?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, I remember when I was 6, 7 years old playing my grandmother's piano, and my father said, Eddie said, oh, he's got something there, let's get him some music lessons.
So how did you come to be discovered by Duke Ellington?
By the time I met Duke Ellington, I had some sort of a profile, and I was introduced to him. And he heard me play, and then he said, listen, I said to him, where can I study? You've got to remember, in 1969, there was nowhere to study jazz. There was no VCA music. There was just no institutions as such. It didn't exist. He recommended I go to Berklee School of Music, sort of created a sort of a liaison. So when I went in there, they all
So he
knew.
helped you.
Yeah. So when I got
in?
there, they knew. Oh, this is Allan Zavod, the first Australian student ever, and recommended by Duke Ellington.
So how long were you at Berkeley before?
I was a student there for about 3 years. I taught there for 2 years, and through doing well at the school, I was able to make a connection with the business sector. There was a trumpet player out with the Glenn Miller Orchestra, and they were looking for a keyboard player. And Bob Summers, he said, "Oh, I know this guy I went to school with, this cat, Allan Zavod. Get him." And I got a phone call. And then from the Glenn Miller Orchestra, led by Buddy DeFranco, I went on to Woody Herman, and then again the same thing happened with Maynard Ferguson. I got a call from a fellow student, because all my fellow students most of them were Americans, and they had their family ties and connections, and I didn't have any of that, but I had done well in the school, and I hadn't thought of it at the time. Really, I was just studying earnestly and doing as well as I could.
Still very young.
Yes, and then that went on to after Maynard Ferguson. That was a world tour, and then I was with Jean-Luc Ponty, a violinist, for 8 years. Jean-Luc Ponty was with Elton John, who's on that Honky Tonk Chateau album. He plays violin. Elton wanted Jean-Luc to continue with him, but Jean-Luc said, "No, I'm putting my own band together." While I was with Woody Herman playing at Disneyland in some concert venue, there was a guitar player out there in the audience. His name is Daryl Sturmer, who now plays with Phil Collins. And Daryl said, "I'm joining this band, Jean-Luc Ponty, in being in LA in 6 months' time. Are you coming through Milwaukee, where I live, on this tour with Woody Herman? Because we could jam." I said, "As a matter of fact, we are." So I jammed with him, and he loved it. He went back to Jean-Luc and recommended me highly. And there was, Jean-Luc had another keyboard player. It wasn't working out. I called Jean-Luc. I was all of 28 years old or something. I called Jean-Luc and said that I'm coming out to. I was living in New York. I said, "I'm coming out to LA I'm playing with this band in New York," and of course I wasn't at all. I was just telling him I'd be out there. And he said, "Oh, you'll be out here, will you? I don't know. It's very interesting. Perhaps you could audition avec moi, with me, and we'll see what happens." So anyway, I just got on the next plane. I got the gig, and then he said, "So, Alan, are you going to play this evening? You're here on a gig. We'll all go to your concert."
And you had
I said,
nowhere
"No,
to
that's
play."
okay. It got cancelled or something." I don't know what I said. I don't know. It's a private function. I don't think it got out of it.
Still got the gig.
Got the gig, and I was with him for 8 years, and then through that raised my profile, because Jean-Luc Ponty had played with Frank Zappa. Frank always kept track of all the things that his fellow musicians had done. Like Jean-Luc Ponty had played with him. He followed Jean-Luc's career after that. So he actually knew me, Frank Zappa.
Before you auditioned?
Yeah, when I got a call, I think he'd made up his mind that if Allan Zavod is, okay personally, he's got the gig.
Personally?
Well, I mean...
No, I know what you're going to say.
When you're on the
That's
road,
why
it's
I'm
like
laughing.
a marriage, as you know yourself.
Yes.
You've been doing all that, and it's got to be compatibility and how you fit in to the organisation. It's 100% attitude, isn't it? And 100% talent.
It is absolutely right.
You see.
I'm going to go into detail because I want you to tell a beautiful story about the way that you had to drive from one place in America right across during the night for the audition. We'll take a short break and be back with the Frank Zappa audition story.
Wrokdown.
Welcome back to Wrokdown. My special guest is Mr. Allan Zavod, or I should say Dr. Allan Zavod.
Very good, Wendy.
Now,
Oops.
we're getting around to our little audition with Frank Zappa, and I read that you were right across the other side of America when the call came
I
through.
was, that's right.
Where were you?
Well, actually, not the other side of America, but I was a ways away from where he was. This was in 1984. There aren't that many flights. There weren't flights from... I was in Arizona, but we had to get to Los Angeles. Frank was in LA. I was with my father, Eddie, who I had taken him to the Grand Canyon for an adventure. Went to Sedona and Grand Canyon and had a look. He was in America to visit me, and we went back to at that time, my girlfriend's house in Arizona, and phone rang. It was one of the road managers from Jean-Luc Ponty band. His name was Chase. He said, "Allan, Frank's looking for a keyboard player. You're the guy. Call him now. Here's the number." I said, "Okay." So I called, and Frank got on the phone. This was at about 7:30 in the evening. Frank's over there, apparently couldn't find a piano player. He jumps on the phone. He says, "How soon can you get here?" I said, "Well, there are no flights, so I'll have to drive." That's what I'm saying. In 1984, the flights didn't go on the hour every hour till 24 hours a day, or at least till the early hours, and red eyes and all that. On those domestic flights, they stopped at about 7:30, and they weren't on the hour. So that was the only way. And I said, "Well, perhaps tomorrow would be good." He said, "No, just drive,
Just drive.
Just get over here." And that was like an 8-hour drive. We got there, the band's there, Frank's there at the rehearsal. It was a big warehouse in the valley that he owns. It was his rehearsal place. And they thought, well, if the boss is staying, we're staying. It's 4 a.m. I mean, at least 3 to 4 a.m, as far as I remember. I was very late. Okay, so he puts this impossible music in front of me to see if I could read.
Now, I read about this, and evidently it was just every time signature you could think of.
Yeah, it was like Stravinsky in score, but in short score. It was, you get all these weird time signatures, and 16/8 and 3/2 going into it was ridiculous. It was impossible.
Do you think he was pulling your leg?
He was. He already knew, as I say, he had already actually known me through Jean-Luc Ponty, because he kept track of all the players who had played with his protégés. Jean-Luc Ponty was one of his protégés. So Jean-Luc Ponty went out and formed his band. I was with that band for 8 years. Frank followed Jean-Luc Ponty's career. Frank knew Allan Zavod. And so I didn't know that, of course. And really, he was just trying to check me out to see if I could get on with people. He apparently had really made up his mind.
Was it tiring? Because it sounds like it was so
delightful to be around, just wonderful. Frank was a very, very straight sort of guy, really.
Really?
Oh yeah. His music, the lyrics to his music are a satire of the American sexual perversion. That's what Frank's culture is. But he writes brilliant music and writes these lyrics. I said to him one day in this fantastic piece, it was beautiful, 20th century atonal piece of music. I said, "Frank, that's such a great piece of music. How can you call it Alien Orifice? What a stupid name, Alien Orifice, or Sinister Footwear." That was another one I liked. But he could see that this one particular piece, I needed to do that every night, because it was a big jazz piece, which was, every night we played it, it was a completely different feel, different solo. I made it grow, that piece.
Was this the volcano?
That was part of the volcano.
Can you
She's talking about the volcano.
Please explain?
At the end of the solo,
Could you please explain
I always
the
played
volcano?
At the end of the solo, I always played the same cue, because I thought, well, I'll play this thing to get the band back in. So I do this thing with octaves going. It was very, very. If you look at the end of the third movement of the piano concerto, the very ending, if you might play that, you'll see that is the volcano. And
we have to have a look at the volcano.
Have a look at the volcano. And so I didn't know that they were having a good laugh about it. I just thought I was doing the right thing. So they all had this little joke. Oh, here comes the volcano, because it was an explosive piece of music that built up and up and up and up and up down to the right. It began low and went up to the top of the keyboard, and then it always got a few cheers, and I was into the cheers and the other bonuses that one got from getting cheers on the road with the Frank Zappa band.
What were the bonuses?
Well, exactly.
Ladies?
Absolutely.
Who thought that the volcano was pretty hot?
I was just trying to get a girl for the night, And
Did you have any luck,
I'll
Al?
say it now, but in Frank's book he says we were all. I don't know if I should say this on your show.
Well, think of a nice way.
Think
Think of a nice way to put it.
I can't say it anymore. He said, I'll quote it from his book. He said, we're all trying to get the ultimate blowjob, right? Which is true. We're all playing and on the road and looking for... Sorry, Wendy. Oh, now I've done it.
I said say it in a nice way, but you...
Didn't I say it right? There we go. You asked. Read it in the book. It's in the book. It's not me. I'm only quoting from the book.
That's all right. You can say it these days.
Deborah Burns does the same. Quotes from the book, don't you, Deborah? Hello.
She does.
Yep.
So, yes, I was
got a great husband too.
I was particularly interested in hearing about the volcano.
That was the volcano, and that was the purpose of the volcano, to cue the band and to get a lady for the night.
So, were you playing with them when they came to Australia?
No.
Is that much later?
By the time I got back to Australia, about 1988, I came here to do... 1986, I came here to begin my a film career. And I started, got off the road and was now writing orchestral scores. And it was a film I got for called Death of a Soldier, starring James Coburn, but it was filmed here in Australia.
So you left the Zappa band?
The Zappa band came in, it was only a year tour anyway. I came back here in 85, 86 to do a film. And during the time that I was here, some promoters had asked me, Alan, you know Frank, we would love to have him, good promoters, would love to have him out, and so I called Frank and he said he would come out. But that never happened. He got ill and...
Something happened. We'll take a short break.
Yeah.
Because I want to then talk about, as you said, coming back here to Australia, because this then started a whole other segment of your life, really.
Indeed.
We'll be back soon.
Wrokdown.
Welcome back. My special guest is Allan Zavod, the doctor.
And these are the best chocolates.
Aren't they good?
Oh, yeah.
Aren't they good? Well, I
Lovely.
don't suggest you have another one just for a minute.
All right, then.
Okay, so where we left off, you had finished working with Frank Zappa and come back to Australia, and you were talking about your first movie.
I had been invited to audition my tapes for the movie 2010 during the time I was in LA, and I always thought, gee, of course I was against John Williams and all of these heavyweights. I was nobody in the film world, but I was known for my touring and performing and recording with, the people we've mentioned. But when I got an opportunity to do a movie in Australia, it was called Death of a Soldier, starring James Coburn, and I had an opportunity to write an orchestral score. So I had members of the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra, but also because I played with the Glenn Miller Orchestra is the reason they were interested in me. They needed original compositions in the style of Glenn Miller. Why? Because the movie was set in 1942 in Melbourne when Americans were... MacArthur was here running the war from this part of the world. One of the Americans... it's an important movie, this movie. One of the Americans brutally murdered about 6 Australian women, Edward Leonsky.
So where did you record the tracks?
I recorded them in Melbourne at Allan Eaton's.
Allan Eaton's. I was just about to say...
Actually, no, that's not true.
No?
The orchestral score I did at Eaton's. But the big band stuff, I went up to Sydney and did them at Studio 301, remember? Remember that? I
do remember 301, but... Eaton's was fabulous, wasn't it?
Oh, Allan had a fabulous space there. Great for orchestral scores. Robin Gray, one of our greatest engineers.
Well, Robin is still...
Yeah, and he just knew how to record an orchestra so that it would sound close up and still sound that was in a big space. Beautiful. He was well ahead of his time.
Now, I know you've actually done at least 30 film scores.
Yeah.
But something that I read in your... bio was the fact that you worked on this classical jazz, fusion?
Well, that's pretty important stuff to me.
Yes.
Because I have my classical background and my jazz background, it was natural that my compositional style would go into a combination of. And I had these thoughts about this. Am I kidding myself? Well, it seems to be working. I've got a jazz group, I've got a symphony orchestra, I'm combining them, and it seems to be working. So I approached James Morrison, one of our icons in this country.
Yes, absolutely.
I said, James, you need an important work. You need a big work, something important. I said, you need a concerto, trumpet concerto. So he said, okay. So we put this thing together. As I said, we played it with the Adelaide Symphony, opened it there, premiered it there. When we did it with 4 performances with the Sydney. We did it with the Munich Radio Orchestra, which is an orchestra that loves James. He has a great following in Europe. And I think it's one of his favourite bands, you know. And at the same time, at Munich, we played a trombone concerto that I had written him. And the work was set in a symphonic setting with a jazz trio and trumpet. And it worked very well. Every night the orchestra came up to me. A lot of the members would say, oh, that was great. We're really loving this.
So they had a great time.
And I said, guys, there's so much music you play every night. So much goes through, from Bruckner to Tchaikovsky to Wagner to Beethoven. I said, you play so much music. How is it that, you know, this is so special to you? I don't understand. Really, I'm asking you seriously, because I find it hard to believe that you're coming up to me every night. You know, I thought they were pretty blasé kind of people. They said, Alan, it's different every night. We love it. Every night's different because of the jazz.
Because of the jazz.
Remember, jazz is spontaneous composition. So there are moments written in the concertos which are for spontaneity.
Within the orchestra?
No.
I was going to say.
No, not within the orchestra.
That'd be very hard, wouldn't it?
Not within the orchestra. The orchestra may interpret a little bit differently all night. Maybe the tempo is different. Maybe they get a bit more excited than other nights. That's where the classical element is important. No. I was playing piano, leading the jazz trio for James. And I didn't conduct when I did my piano concerto. Again, you see, that was a good test. My piano concerto was for the Australian Youth Orchestra, conducted by Cellario. Cellario is an Italian opera conductor, never known the first thing about jazz. And yet, he was able to, he asked me a few questions along the way, but Cellario was able to conduct that work. And that was a good test that was confirming to me that I was on the right track. See, the success of those works in the past have now, let's talk about right now, have given me the encouragement to develop a couple of awards, because I've considered myself an educator as well as a performer and composer. And I've developed 2 awards. One is the Zavod Classical Jazz Fusion Composers Award. Melbourne University administer this award. My other award is for performers. It's called the Zavod Classical Jazz Fusion Performers Award, and that's administered by Monash University. And Dame Elizabeth Murdoch, as she agreed to be my patron and benefactor for the Performers Award at Monash.
Well, congratulations on that, and I want to thank you so much for coming in to talk to us. Thank you from Wrokdown. See you next week. Thank you.